On this week's Mailbag episode, opening day is right around the corner, folks, and we've got some spring training updates to discuss. With Gavin Sheets potentially playing himself into the opening day roster, Matt Waldron being injured, Yu Darvish suffering from some fatigue. Is he going to be okay? And of course, like I said, it's the Mailbag, so we're going to be answering your questions. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, March 17th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, where I have not been posting as much as usual, but I promise I will be posting more, and at LO_Padres on Twitter /X, by the way. Feel free to hit me up on either of those accounts to potentially get yourself into the Mailbag sweepstakes. I don't know what to call it exactly, but every Monday, guys, we do an episode on this show talking about whatever you suggest. YouTube comments, I get some messages on Twitter, all that sort of stuff. We're going to be getting into that. Very exciting stuff. But today's episode, guys, let me tell you, it is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Go check that out, guys. Today's show, man, let me tell you, let's just start off by saying it, man. It's March 17th. It's only 10 more days until opening day. I almost held up the wrong finger amount, but I'm excited and it's really cool. And it's funny that, and by the way, when I say opening day, I understand that like the Dodgers and Cubs play their series soon. I get that. I'm saying like for everybody else. And frankly, I think that this Seoul series, Japan series that they keep doing, last year with Padres, Dodgers, I think it's pretty great. I think it's really fun to have this. It reminds me a little tiny bit. It's like MLB's equivalent to how you have Thursday night kickoff for the NFL season. Right. The NBA, I think, used to do it like that, where you'd have like one game, they still do. You have one game, then the rest of everybody starts later. So I'm not calling it the official opening day. And frankly, though, I think it's great for baseball that they're like, wow, you know what we should do? We should probably really veer in the direction of Korea and Japan because they really like baseball over there. Who would have thunk it, aside from anyone who's been paying attention to the world over the past 20 years? But no, enough of my soapbox, guys. Today, couple of notes I want to run through first over what's happened in spring training thus far. Tomorrow, we're probably doing a bigger update, bigger deep dive into all of these things, but I figured we'll just talk about them a little bit before we get into some of the mailbag questions. Good story on Leota DeVries in the Athletic that I recommend everyone check out about kind of the Padres and their, how they tend to push people. Or I should say, how they tend to not rush and push isn't necessarily the right word, but they tend to be pretty aggressive with pushing their prospects. I use the word. It tend to be a little bit aggressive when moving and promoting their prospects up through the various levels of the minors and whatnot. Talking about Leota DeVries and Ethan Salas, especially in this piece, I thought it was really cool. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think that both of these prospects are really, really great. I recommend everyone go check out Just Baseball's Top 100, discussing Ethan Salas and discussing DeVries, both of them especially. Probably the former, because I think that Salas is... What has really impressed me so far with him is just the defense and the intangibles seem to be really, really great for a player that young. I sometimes don't care about intangibles when someone's like 27 and we already know that they're not a good player on the field. Like that's when I don't care about intangibles. But when you're like this 17-year-old kid, 18 years old in this case, like I do think that says a lot that you have a little bit of an edge to you already and a little bit of an impact, I think, on the team, the ball club, whatever you want to call it, especially when it comes to your defense. So Salas is really exciting. Whether or not he is going to be able to be more aggressive with fastballs and be able to really maximize the pitches that he does get, that he's able to hit for enough power to become a good offensive major league catcher remains to be seen, but I'm excited to get the answer. So again, go check out that piece. It's really great on The Athletic. Matt Waldron, our boy, is going to be starting the season on the IL thanks to an oblique injury. I am very sad. Everyone's very sad. And by everyone, I mean probably just me. That is my guy. The Padres are optimistic that they caught the injury before it became serious, a mild oblique strain. As a knuckleballer, Waldron might not need much time to ramp back up once he resumes throwing, but That's provided not much time passes before he resumes throwing. And quotes from Mike Schilt, every day you're down, the longer it takes to get back. If you have a setback with an oblique, similar to a hamstring, the second setback's longer. So you don't want that first setback, but it's there. And but it's here. We just want to make sure we're intentional about not having a second one. Look, it stinks. This is another injury for another pitcher who is potentially in competition for that final spot. I talked about Matt Waldron in the latest piece on The Athletic, actually, talking about some of the updates. Actually mentioned this too, that the Padres, while Darvish was out, and this has been one of the reasons that I've been campaigning for him to not necessarily get the fifth spot, but why I've been on a campaign spreading some Matt Waldron love, because I do think that he has some value and can produce for this team, because I remember what happened last year. I understand we talked about his numbers, that he had like a 8-start stretch where he went 6 innings and gave up 2 runs or less in all of them, right? Like, he was really, really good in like July to a little bit of August, and he really kept the team afloat. I know that sounds weird to people, but in the middle of the season, this is a Padres team that Michael King was not fully established yet, right? Remember, he started off a little bit poorly. He was giving up some of the most home runs of any starting pitcher in the league. Dylan Cease, very good, but he is a little bit of an ebbs and flow guy, right? It's like he can go through these stretches like he did last year, say, against the Mets at points, where he just gives up a home run, banquet to opposing teams. And then you had the Darvish injury, you had Musgrove and whatnot. Waldron was like at one point one of the most like reassuring starters that the team had, so I still think he can have value later on, even if he isn't going to immediately get that rotation spot. I still think he could come back, and if he locates in the zone correctly with his sweeper and his knuckleball, I think he could give you at least a little bit of value whenever guys get hurt. Whenever some guys are like Dylan Cease going through a little bit of a rough patch, you can have someone like Waldron who at least produces a little bit for you. So I'm looking forward to that. But for now, he is out of it. Similar to the Brian Hoeing injury, those two are out of it, obviously, for this fifth and final spot. And it looks like it's between Stephen Kolek, Randy Vasquez, and our new boy, Mr. Kyle Hart, who gave up 2 earned runs over the weekend. I don't really have like a preference at the moment. I think that it might be Kyle Hart, only because of the money that was guaranteed. Not that it's a ton of money, but that's the direction I think. But I also think that they could use him as a bullpen guy. And considering the losses of Brian Hoeing and Sean Reynolds, it wouldn't surprise me if they go that route. And then maybe if, let's say, Randy Vasquez doesn't do well, maybe they swap the roles. That could happen. Maybe they're going to go with Stephen Kolek because of the ground ball rate, because the stuff seems a little bit better. And as I've discussed on the show previously for my everydayers out there, just the in general vibe that like having a fifth starter who is just going to be steady and produce a lot of weak contact compared to the high strikeout stuff of a lot of the other pitchers in this rotation, I think could serve some value. So we're going to see how it pans out. But for now, we don't fully know. Gavin Sheets, he's going off. We're going to talk more about him. He's been homering his way potentially to the opening day roster. Now, I don't know if that's going to be great or not, right? I don't really know. I think that when it comes to doing this well, you have to remember that, yes, it is spring training, but it is also true that hitting this much power is something that you can't really ignore. Last year, the majors' top 6 home run hitters were O'Neal Cruz, Willie Adames, Colton Cowser, Wyatt Langford, Kyle Stowers, and Seiya Suzuki. So with the exception of Stowers, as the Athletic notes, all of them hit at least 16 home runs in the regular season. It's not nothing, but it's still a player that is a little bit of a liability defensively. I don't know where you'd plug him, but what I think it does show is that the first few weeks, even month, I think of this Padres season is going to be really fascinating for left field. I don't know what's going to happen here. I could see Connor Joe, as we've talked about, my everydayers, getting sent down after the first couple weeks because he has an option. I could also see Jason Hayward, who looks completely overmatched, it seems, and in spring training, who has defensive capabilities. And I think with him, Merrill and Tatis could be one of the better defensive outfields in the National League this year. That I could see them being like, you know what, the guy needs to produce a little bit more offensively and he's not. So he could get sent down. They could plug in Gavin Sheets for some power. I don't know what they're going to do, but this left field crop, because even Brandon Lockridge is someone that Padres brass seems to at least be somewhat intrigued by. It's going to be a storyline to follow, and I'm excited to get into it. But we're not done, of course, guys, talking about spring training. And we certainly haven't gotten into answering your questions just yet, but we will. But first, a word from our sponsors. And our first sponsor that we must discuss today is one that is nice and chewy, one that is nice and healthy, and one that, above all else, is wonderful, folks, and that is our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios, which is a snack that's both delicious and nutritious. So crack into a good source of it, guys, with Wonderful Pistachios. It is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats. They're really, really good to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I like the no shells variety too. You know, every now and then you can just grab and go. Maybe you just need you can't crack them at the moment, so you just reach into your bag and you're grabbing some of them pistachios and getting your protein fill and all that stuff. They've got some other flavors as well. So go, guys, get it checked out, get snackin', and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and at least somewhat vibing here, as always. Last thing I want to mention, speaking of the left fielders, I forgot to mention this in the first segment before we answer some questions. Tirso Ornelas, been doing really well. He hit the ball 114 miles per hour on Saturday. That was great. I was hanging out in town. I did not exactly see the game because when you're out celebrating where I am for St. Patrick's Day, I don't think that the spring training for the Padres is usually a game that you could get on the TV. But nonetheless, really, really cool. Tirso, I think, is the guy that it wouldn't surprise me if he's a very good player for the team this year, or at least a very important piece for the team this year to round out that lineup. However, I do think that it could be some time because the Padres seem to like some of their other options. They have Joe, they have Gavin Sheets now, they have Jason Hayward, they have even Oscar Gonzalez, whoever it is, Brandon Lockridge, whoever it is. I think that there's still going to be a little competition, but I really like his hit tool. He's hitting the ball hard. He's in there. You know what I mean? So I do think that there is some hope there, and I'm excited about it. But folks, enough of the spring training. I mean, we're still talking spring training, but let's talk about your guys' questions and what questions you guys have pertaining to the spring slate. But first, some questions about Tatis. Some comments at Six Pack Alley Cat says, you should know better. Once someone gets popped, your legacy basically dies. Of course, referring to Friday's episode of Fernando Tatis Jr., where I talked about whether or not he's being a little bit disrespected. And my conclusion was like a little bit. And I think that my belief with PEDs has never been that it's good, right? Like I'm not going crazy where I'm like, yeah, bring back PEDs. This is great. These things take a toll on people, and there's a reason that they're illegal. It's against the rules. And what Tatis did was bad. And I really think importantly was that the team like accosted him. I think super rightfully so when the news dropped, because they had just went all in signing Juan Soto, right? So you have this event happen, and then immediately it's like you get the air sucked out of the tire, right? Like you're just so annoyed that you get Juan Soto and you're about to have Tatis as well. That would have made for an amazing combination, and they went far even considering they didn't have Tatis. My only thing was sometimes when people put the PEDs and the energy that people show towards people who get popped for the performance-enhancing drugs is sometimes, I think, a little bit incongruous with the things that I find really annoying about the world and what people do. If that makes sense, that is not nearly as vague as I wanted it to come out. People probably know what I'm saying, but that was my only thing, where I'm watching like Yankees fans boo this guy vociferously, and I'm like, you guys were watching Domingo Germán and you were cheering Josh Donaldson the other day. Like, I don't know. So every now and then that bothers me. But in terms of cheating, it is bad. And I think that Tatis did lose a lot of sway, I think, in the league. And it is something that's going to be with him for a while. But I will say that he's super young. And it's possible for you to overcome these things. And frankly, you know how I know that? Because there are players in the Hall of Fame who have quite literally on record admitted to cheating and got in anyway. They wrote a book about it in some cases. So I think that he can get over it. These things are very wishy-washy, but I do agree, sir, that once you get popped for these things, it stays with you for a while. But I do think that if Tatis plays it well, if he's just a great player, exciting player, the talent that we all know he can be, I really don't think too many people are going to like hold on to this like with all their might when it comes to the overall look at his career. But I could be wrong, because at Mr. Grimm says he disrespected himself using PEDs. Now, of course, in that episode on Friday, my everydayers know it wasn't that simple. I wasn't saying that Tatis should be innocent now. And there was a lot of comments, and notably, Someone mentioned at JDS3rd says Nando hasn't been the same since PEDs. It's widely known the damage and harm these substances cause to the body. It may be one reason he hasn't had a full season healthy during this mammoth contract thus far. Huge question mark going forward, unfortunately. And I think that that's totally fair, right? Bottom line is OPS has fallen like 100 points. Basically, since he's been popped for PEDs. He has not had the godly season that we've wanted. But one of the things we talked about in the episode was he has shown a lot of signs of it, though. Last year, 134 WRC+. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's 135, actually. And his expected weight on base was 387, which was one of the highest of all outfielders in Major League Baseball. Like, he's actually gotten a little bit unlucky with his hard hit rate. My big thing with Tatis is that he's not walking as much. Right, he's a little bit too aggressive at the plate, but I think with the change in some of his approach that we've seen this spring, where he's letting the action come more to him, he's not wagging the bat as much, measuring the leg kick to a certain degree, more from the hip. I think that he could still be an awesome player. And we saw in the playoffs, he went absolutely nuclear. So there is this feeling of it's tough. Right? Like, we don't know which is the real Tatis. And I think that it is actually a totally fair question that I don't think is malicious when people ask it, at least not usually, right? But I do think that that is totally fair, that overall this is still a player that, you know, has to figure some things out, right? Lefties versus lefties last year, he wasn't as good. He had an OPS of 682 against lefties, 881 against righties. Like, this is just a guy overall that we've seen has not been the same. Since the PED stuff, and I think that's why everybody's a little bit freaking out. And yet, you see all the hard hit stuff. You see the fact that he hits it harder than anybody. You see the fact that he's not striking out at a super detrimental rate. You see the fact that he's launching bombs during the playoffs. You see the fact that he's getting unlucky with his weighted on base stuff. That's why we're all still in on him. But I agree, until we see it again, got to be a little bit skeptical. At LFGSD Padres also says probably one of your better episodes, referring to the Tatis explainer. Everybody go check that out from, was it Thursday or Friday? It was actually Thursday, I think. Friday was my fantasy podcast with Millard. More of these comprehensive takes on players like Xander and Machado and Merrill and whoever else. Well, you're in luck, my good friend. We're going to be doing an episode this week about Manny Machado, diving deep into his career as a Padre, and I think what we are expecting for him in 2025, and whether or not, is he like a tiny bit underrated now? Maybe. We're going to answer that question, guys. So look forward to that. Got another question, of course, from the always questionable. That sounded wrong. The always wise, the always interesting. I don't know. Rama Murdy, though, he responds to the YouTube saying the most important thing for Tatis is for him to stay healthy for an entire season. If he stays healthy and can learn to hit all fields with power and not swing at pitches in the dirt, he can be an MVP. I'm optimistic he can realize his potential with Schilt and the coaching staff. And someone responded saying this: Schilt is 0-4 in elimination games in his playoff career. He babies the players. Not great for development or growth. Maybe he will learn as he goes. However, he hasn't so far. I have a question. This isn't even a hate on this. Is bad in elimination, is that a little cherry picked? Because he's won playoff series before. I don't know. My thing is this. I just think that the manager is just not a position that I or you or anyone, aside from win-loss record, are able to fully gauge how good a manager is. It's just hard. It's not like the other sports. At the same time, I think that with this Padres team, you have to remember that they've had so many managers over the years, so it's just kind of good to have one where you're like, okay, I feel pretty good about this guy. Will he end up getting blamed if this team falls apart? Probably. But that's the thing, is that the manager, I don't think is... This is why 2 summers ago, I was like, if you had to fire someone, I did think that AJ Preller was deserving of it, because this is a guy who's had like 7 managers. Usually the one common factor is the thing that's at fault, not just that you've missed 7 times. But whatever, I'm going down too much of a rabbit hole. Continuing on, Mr. Ramarudi says, I could see Yuki Matsui or Jeremiah Estrada as possible sleeper picks. Also, Tirso or Nellis may have a Jackson Merrill type season. Easy, my man. Easy up with the Jackson Merrill stuff. I hope this doesn't become a thing where everyone's just going to assume that highly touted rookies are Jackson Merrill now. But I like your question. With Garrett Cole being out for 2025, do you think the Yankees will make a desperation trade for Dylan Cease before the start of the season? Who could they offer from their top prospects to make it happen? The first part of your question, not before the beginning of the season. There just hasn't been any indication, in my opinion, that the Padres are going to move Michael King or Dylan Cease before the season. I think it's a trade deadline thing. I really do. The only way that they would move him before the beginning of the season, I think is like if the Baltimore Godfather offer came in, right? This is something we've talked about on the show a couple of times, that if Baltimore is like, we'll give you Basallo, right? That would be insane. If we'll give you Basallo, McDermott, maybe one other outfield prospect in there too, then maybe they consider it. Maybe Kobe Mayo, although he's fallen off a little bit by prospect ratings, but I don't really see it. With the Yankees, Jason Dominguez is their top guy. Spencer Jones is another top-level guy of theirs. George Lombard Jr., but he's in just high A, right? Will Warren, he's okay, but, like, are these the type of players that you want to trade for, like, trade now? I don't know. Jason Dominguez, really exciting player. I think that would be a big one. But he's going to be, like, their starting outfielder, right, in left field. So I don't think that they're getting rid of Jason Dominguez. I think the only way Preller does this is if there's a Godfather offer that comes in. He's just keeping his options open. If they give me a lot of prospects that help me reset for the future, give me a lot more ammo, retool the farm, then yes, I may get rid of Cease. Otherwise, still trying to go for it this year. So I do not see that. And with the Yankees, I don't think that the prospects right now are conducive to that, I would say. I do not think that it is a good match just yet. I think it would have to be Jason Dominguez. I really do. Otherwise, I don't know too much about these Yankees prospects. They're all that exciting. When you go to Baltimore, though, it's like, okay, and Baltimore really needs some pitching help. So you get yourself, I don't know, just a Basallo or a Mayo, and then maybe you throw in McDermott. It wouldn't be crazy. Guys. But we got more questions to answer, guys, and a lot of crazy ones, too. Sort of. They're not that crazy, actually. Kind of normal, I would actually say. For the most part, I think. And we'll get into those questions in just a second, guys. But first, one more word from our sponsors. Folks, let me tell you something about something, folks. And that something that I'm going to tell you something about is our good friends over at Monarch Money. Because let me tell you, if you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, let me tell you, online shopping, entertainment, fine dining, just going out. It's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, right? Command center, folks. That's what it does. And it tracks all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start willingly building your wealth. My voice gets weird sometimes, guys. What can I say? But they've got a bunch of different insights. They help you budget and save more. A lot of convenience, no just multiple apps. You could just, like they said, a financial command center for you to just go in, check out all the things that you need for your finances. You can set goals. You can share and track your personal accounts, stay on the same page without the stress. So what are you waiting for? Go take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back in the final segment of today's Locked On Padres podcast. Keep it locked here every day. We're going to be talking about Manny Machado tomorrow and some more, or at least maybe Wednesday. My bad. And then do some spring training notes and whatnot. We are so close to opening day, and we are so close to some of you people losing it. As my man, Padres San Diego SH1T. If you catch my drift. He says Padres are going to be a disgrace this year. I'm not pulling up. Man, what's the negativity, man? Here's the thing, though. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because it really is funny how much of a vibe shift there was, basically from, I would say, from losing out on Roki to the Pivetta signing. Because after and Jose Iglesias too, by the way. Jose Iglesias too, pretty good player last year and has been around the majors and been a solid major leaguer for a while. Good guy to have that you might even see start some days. Even with Bogarts playing, I should say. The vibe shift is pretty crazy because I haven't been nearly as negative. I mean, I understand that I've been talking about on this show, for my everydayers know, my big bold prediction this year was the one outcome and kind of seasonal arc we have not seen from this Padres era, let's call it, in the Preller era, is the good season, but you miss the playoffs. That hasn't happened, right? It's weird to think about that, right? But 2019, bad year. You started okay in the first half, really bad in the second half. 2020, right? 60-game season. You guys blow up. You break literal records, right? A literal Grand Slam record, and you become a national story. Really, really fun. 2021, start off great. Horrible collapse in the second half, missed the playoffs. 2022, kind of tread water, then make the big trade, and you made the playoffs. 23, historically disappointing, missed the playoffs. 2024, historically great, especially in the second half, make the playoffs. You haven't had like a good season, like 89 wins, let's say, something that teams like the Blue Jays have done over the past few years, something like the Mariners are a good example, like pretty good teams that have missed the playoffs. The D-backs last year, that's what I've been talking about, but I'm still optimistic overall about the Padres, and I still think they'll, at very minimum, like, guys, I remember when Corey Spangenberg was the guy that we were hoping at second base. Now, Jose Iglesias is just like a yay, right? Like, that's fun, right? Or Jake Cronenworth, that's just like a cool one, right? So it is really important to remember that this Padres organization really has changed in a lot of ways, and there's at least a reason to watch that isn't just, I can't wait for that high A rookie kid to debut in 6 years. Then maybe we'll have something. It's really cool. But I guess not everybody always feels the same. You look different, says at KC_M. I listen to you all the time, Javier. You look insanely different from how I pictured you. I'm shook. To be fair, I'm always wrong about the podcast people I listen to. I don't know about you guys. First of all, thank you. Thank you, my friend. KC_M. I really appreciate you guys listening. I have that all the time with podcasts. I think it's actually pretty common that when people haven't seen you in appearance and you're only used to hearing their voice, it's very jarring every time seeing what they actually look like. So hopefully I don't spook you guys too much. You know? I hope I don't. I know my face isn't necessarily the most incredible in the world. Not exactly a Prince Charming, but we get by anyway. And I'm wearing pink today. And I hope you guys enjoy the pink because I know I am, because I'm in a good mood. But moving on to another comment. At LFGST Padre says, "What's up, Friar homie? You said a lot, but in terms of..." First of all, I like that. You said a lot. Agreed. I did say a lot. You said a lot, but in terms of Tirso, I don't know if he has ever hit in a major league game and stadium. One thing is 2,000 people at Peroya. And another thing is 40,000 fans at Petco. He might fold under all that pressure. When are you going to bring me on the show, dude? I'm a local Padres fan. You had Australia, New Zealand. Now it's time for a local to represent. I don't know, man. Maybe message me on Twitter. We'll see. We'll figure it out. But in terms of that, yeah, I mean, that's kind of always the case, though, right? Like, of course, no one's saying that him producing in spring training means that he's going to immediately parlay that into major league success. But reason I'm high on Tirso is just I think he has the highest upside right now. He's just an unknown quantity, and that's really fun. But that doesn't mean I want him to be opening day, give him the job for 6 months. More like I think he should be on the team and get plenty of opportunities and chances. And then you have some veterans who don't have the issue of the added pressure to be backups and or even primary starters until he kind of finds his feet. Because to me, I'm seeing him slap the ball all over the place. He's been turning a lot of heads. I don't know what else you got to do. But then Gavin Sheets, who hasn't had as much major league experience, and the major league experience that he has had has been pretty bad, right? Liability in the outfield, not very good there. My thing is, let's try out the unknown thing, right? We never know what's going to happen until he gets a shot. So I'm excited to see how that goes down. But I take your point, my good friend. Another comment coming from the always very many things to say, Mr. Ramamurti says, "I know it's only spring training, but Suarez is really struggling. I'm sure he will be fine, but the struggles could carry over the regular season." Hey, not to say I told y'all so, but I have been a little bit negative on Robert Suarez myself. He worries me. I think that Suarez, you look at his Sierra, you look at the fact that his strikeout rate declined in the second half from 24 to 21%. He had a 4.28 ERA in the second half. He stranded 80% of runners, something that usually you don't do consistently year to year over and over. Just let a bunch of guys on base and then always retire the side. I'm a little bit worried about him. Do I think he could be a good reliever? Absolutely. But he does not generate as much swing and misses for someone who gives up hard contact and for someone who throws a lot of fastballs as I would like. So I am a little bit worried. And again, this is what I talked about before the season. Do not be surprised if Yuki, Jeremiah Estrada, Jason Adam, if they end up being the closer at some point this year. It would not surprise me at all. But crazier things have happened, and maybe I'm just a moron, and Suarez is going to be even better this year. We will see. At Tony Sue 8860 asks perhaps one of my favorite comments I've seen on the show in a while. "If you believe that pitching and defense wins championships, unless a trade drastically alters the makeup of this team, this is probably the strongest Preller team ever. The starting 3 or 4 are one of the strongest in all of MLB, and there's actual depth. There are maybe 4-5 good candidates for the 5th rotation spot." I don't think this is the best Preller team ever. Right? I think that this is a really good Preller team. Really, really good. I'm excited about it. I think that the additions they've made towards the end of the offseason were just really salvaged what I think was a really tough offseason. But for me, I think that last year's still better because last year, this is a team that had, Solano and Profar and David Peralta and Luis Ariz, but I still get what you're saying. And it is echoed a little bit by another comment that I really, really enjoyed at Raul Gut 4030. Bullpen is one of the best in MLB, and no lineup is necessarily stacked 1 through 9. Name one team that is. Tatis missed 60 games last season and still won 93 games, and Machado wasn't himself until late June. A healthy Tatis, Machado, and Merrill can carry any lineup. One last note, all possible position starters on Dodgers lineup, only one is under 30 years old. Keep that in mind. Padres still have a great median of superstar youth and experience. I mostly agree except for that last point. I think that they do have a lot of age, right? Like I know we have Merrill, I understand that, but for me, I'm looking and Tatis, but for me it's, you still got Machado and Bogarts and Darvish, right? Like it's not like they're spring chickens either, but I get your point that it's not like it wouldn't be insane if someone declined on the Dodgers. It wouldn't be, because they are old, right? That's just how baseball works. Guys tend to fall off a little bit. Paul Goldschmidt was an MVP, and then he fell off the next year because he's old. That's just what happens. This isn't a shot at anybody, right? But it is possible. I think that I really like your point about the lineup depth, though. I have never really agreed with this sentiment that you'll hear from a lot of experts and whatnot, that the Padres are a little bit of stars and scrubs. I don't really agree with that. Because here's the thing. The big thing about this has been that the Padres stars haven't always performed, right? Like you just mentioned Manny Machado. He was hurt a lot of last year. The year before that, he didn't produce as much. Tatis was injured for a lot of the year. Xander Bogaerts injured and hasn't produced. So it's not just that they have stars and no depth. It's that their stars haven't actually produced. They've gotten some good stuff. Now, some years more than most, right? We did talk about this on the lineup depth thing. They do struggle a little bit. I think, though, that they're being constantly compared to the Dodgers, which have Teoscar Hernandez and Michael Conforto and Will Smith and Tommy Edman as like these end-of-the-lineup pieces that make them look better. But my thing is like, okay, why do you guys love the Guardians, though? The Guardians never have lineup depth. You know what I mean? I've been following baseball for too long. I've never seen the Guardians with lineup depth. You know what I'm saying? I cannot understand how you look at Tatis, Machado, Bogarts, Jake Cronenworth, Jackson Merrill, Elias Diaz, and a combination of Tirso, Connor Joe, Jason Hayward, and all those guys, and you won't bring up the lineup depth problems that, say, the Guardians have, where you're like, Will Brennan? Rocchio? Brito? I mean, you got Jose Ramirez. We like that, but Carlos Santana? I don't understand why this Padres team more so. I think that is a little bit of a result of just seeing so much money paid to big stars that people kind of cognitively are like, well, that must mean that their depth is bad. And I'm like, the depth isn't great. They haven't always done well with that. We talked about this on an episode a couple weeks ago, that like the Matt Carpenter, Nelson Cruz year, that was really bad. G-Man Choi, Garrett Cooper, they haven't always had production at the bottom of the lineup, but I just don't accept this idea that you're implying that other teams have. Does that make any sense? And I just don't agree with that. Yes, Atlanta, Dodgers, Phillies, but those are some of the best teams in baseball. In a vacuum, I think the Padres are like average when it comes to their lineup depth sometimes. And then occasionally above average like they were last year. So I do agree with you, sir. I think the lineup depth is okay. They just need to put together, something a little bit more consistent, I think, and then they can really compete at the highest level. But I just want everyone to remember, it's not because the bottom of the lineup hasn't always produced. It's because their stars haven't produced. That is a fair thing to critique, I think, objectively, is this whole, we maybe don't prepare for the future enough and we just throw money at the problem instead of balancing out the contracts a little bit more. That is a fair criticism of Preller and management, at least for me. Last comment, though, because I got to answer it because it's about my boy at Johnny Cage 1057 says, San Diego ruined Eric Hosmer with the Royals. He was a Gold Glove first baseman and World Series champion. I like that both being a Gold Glove and World Series champion basically have no impact on how good a player is. Because Pablo Sandoval is a world champion, that doesn't mean he's better than Manny Machado. This isn't like other sports, right? Where the playoff success really is integral to how good you were as a player. That's just not how it is, right? Mike Trout has made the playoffs once. You're telling me you would, if you're starting a team of this generation, that he ain't your first pick? Of course he is. He's amazing, right? So that's not true. And Gold Glove, I'm like, okay, cool. Does it matter? Because we've seen over and over that these awards, particularly Gold Glove, is a little bit of a popularity contest. Jeter won like 4. He grades out as one of the worst middle infielders of the 21st century. I'm not kidding. Juan Soto was nominated for a Gold Glove. You guys watched him here in San Diego. That wasn't true. I'm not going to say that the Padres did great with him. That much I'll agree with. Right? That's totally fine for you to be like, hey, it's no wonder he suffered here. But my other thing is that when he was with the Royals, he showed issues too. Going by wins above replacement, he had 1 win his first year, negative 1.4, then 3.1, then negative 0.2, then 3.5, then 0.2, then 3.7. See what I mean? It was an every other year thing, which suggests it wasn't just the Padres. It's not like, you know what criticism this would have worked more with? Xander Bogaerts. That would actually be a better example because that dude was consistently great for a while, got to the Padres, health falls apart. That would make a little bit more sense. And I've seen Johnny Cage comments on this channel a lot, just a bunch of troll things, but I like making fun of people every now and then, not all the time. I don't want to be mean, but I like making fun of people who don't know how to use a sound argument for anything. So with that said, everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Probably going to be talking with my boy Millard this year about busts for this upcoming MLB season for just in general, I think, in baseball. Not in a fantasy perspective. We're going to be talking. We're also going to be doing an episode of Manny Machado, doing some spring training notes, and hopefully, I've seen some stories lately. Some extension talks in the works. I don't know. A little birdie out there, they've been saying something. So maybe does that happen? I doubt it. But keep your ears tuned in, folks. And until that next time, stay safe and of course, stay faithful. My fire faithful homies, take care.